Hey, what's up everyone? Today we're going to be doing a intro / chapter 1 review of this book, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. So this book is one of my personal favorites. I've bought a lot of books and gone through some of them kind of stopped midway. This is one where I kind of pushed through and I really liked it. It really stood out to me. I started looking into a little bit about Eckhart Tolle and liked the way he spoke. And of course, like there's some people where you see a certain characteristic about them and it automatically just makes you want to learn more. And for Eckhart Tolle, what really stood out to me was his sense of peace. If you've ever listened to him speak publicly, he gives a lot of wisdom, kind of picks apart different situations and helps people. And he's not like this type of, guru who just knows everything. He's just very aware and gives very practical advice and helps you understand things. So it's very interesting. If you're not familiar with Eckhart Tolle, before you even buy the book, I recommend maybe looking at some of his YouTube videos. I'm going to go into this book just a little bit, the introduction and chapter 1. So the reason I want to review this book is because I feel like it's huge in terms of peace, and peace is big. In order to sit down and read a book, before we go into any of those, you need to be able to sit down and focus. You need to be able to put your attention to where you want to put it. And in a time like this where social media or so many things can get your attention, it's very easy to get distracted and not do the things that you need to do. So I just thought this would be a cool start. Plus I just love Eckhart Tolle and his books. So I'll get into the introduction. So of course the title is called Power of Now, which kind of implies, and if you know why you're buying the book, it's kind of about the sense of peace and the meditations and wisdom that he provides through his own experience. So in the introduction, the very first sentence is that he has very little use for the past. So if you know anything about meditation, you know that to focus on the past is depression, to focus on the future is anxiety, and when you're living in the present moment, that's when you have peace. That's a quote by Lao Tzu. I might have messed it up a little bit, but yeah. But that's also the point of meditation, is to focus on the present moment and kind of sit still, and any thoughts or actions that come to your mind, you're really just sitting still, so you're observing them coming in and out, and you just become more mindful and see exactly what's going on in your head, and you get to kind of separate yourself from those thoughts. For someone who's gotten great peace and he's already saying that he's ditched the past, it's a big moment, and it's something big to understand. Before going any further, is just understanding that alone. That was pretty cool that he just mentioned that he has very little use for the past. I think a lot of us can relate, because a lot of times we're worried about actions that we've done, whether we did them right, whether we could have done them better, what we said, what we didn't say, when in fact a lot of the times it's much easier on our mind to just kind of make a decision and go, an educated decision, best thought out decision. But a lot of times we waste a lot more time thinking about things and actually doing stuff. And although we might see energy as like physical, like I'm not necessarily running a sprint, so I'm not going to get tired. Well, if you're thinking and putting your attention in different places, you're still going to lose a lot of energy, mental energy. And at the end of the day, you're just going to become really tired and drained, and you're not going to get really anything done. So that's just one of the reasons why he doesn't care too much about the past. It is important, of course. It helps you make decisions, and history is very important. You like to see what you did before so you can do something better. But I think the point is to detach yourself from it so you don't dwell on it and waste more energy than you need to before moving on. So despite him saying that he has very little use for the past, he mentions that he still wants to, of course, tell it, because it helps us get context for what's to come in the book. He starts by mentioning how when he was younger, around his 20s, that he had a very difficult time in his life. He was struggling with depression, anxiety, and a lot of really deep things that we might relate to in a sense, but he was at a point where it was really, really bad, and he would come home and he would just kind of hate himself. And he represents this as him laying in bed, staring kind of at the walls and only seeing figures and outlines of the walls. It was just pretty much a very messed up state that he was in, and he knew this. He could feel it, he could see it. He saw things as literally objects instead of like a place he was in. And when he mentions that he was seeing the shadows and the outlines of things, it kind of just shows his perspective of like how deep he was in that state. and that's all he could really focus on. So it got to the point where he was thinking some very negative thoughts, and he actually was thinking how he didn't want to exist anymore, and that's just to say it lightly, but he was thinking darker thoughts. But he came across this sentence that I cannot live with myself any longer. And it was at this moment where he had this very interesting realization where he thought about that sentence again, and he repeated it, and he just said, I cannot live with myself any longer. And through this sentence, he kind of realized that there was two, this is going to be really hard to explain and really hard to understand, two entities really, that he could not live with himself. So there was himself that he could not live with. So it was like he was here, and what he could not live with was himself. Now I know that sounds like really weird, but basically what he was saying that him and his thoughts are separated. He was thinking, well, who said that? And if someone thought that, then it must be separate from his thoughts. So he explains this by saying the first word in that sentence was I, and the self that he cannot live with was the self. So I could not live with myself. So there was a bit of a disconnect there, and it kind of made him interested. He kind of just stopped, and all the negative thoughts he was thinking kind of went away for a second, because it was just so odd that he realized this. It was kind of an awe-inspiring. Now, the reason this was such a big breakthrough, of course, is because for years he was struggling with the past, telling himself that he cannot live with himself, and that's a very dark thought to have, and to think that himself was, he was associating his thoughts and who he was with the self. And as the book explains later, it's a bit of an egoic term, an egoic thought, but this brought him a lot of hope, because imagine you messed up. Let's say you're at work and you accidentally really upset someone, or whatever field of work you're in. Let's say you disappoint people, you've been disappointing people a few times over and over, and you feel like you just can't get it right, and you start to associate yourself with those actions. So let's say you were failing or you were messing up, you start to think of yourself as a failure or a mess up, when in fact it was just those actions, which are immutable and they can be changed, that were happening. So just as actions can happen that way, so can your thoughts. So he was saying that he's a failure, or he was thinking that he was messing up. So he made the mistake of thinking he was a mess up and a failure. And when you think those kind of thoughts, you don't really have much hope in changing them. So this one moment separated himself from those thoughts. And even though he had still done those actions, and he still took responsibility for them, and he still felt really bad about them, it gave him a lot of hope in the sense that, well, he is the person who's guiding the rest of himself, and as long as that's the case, he can change it. It's not permanent, which is huge, because if you think of mistakes and regret with permanence, you can see how that just makes for a really bad time. Realization, he said for about 6 months he lived in a state of like absolute peace and just bliss, where not as much was bothering him, or it may have been in comparison to what he was feeling before, but it was a drastic change, and he just was feeling much more happier, much more alive. And after this, his friends and people who saw him before would come up to him and ask him, kind of how like I explained in the beginning of the video, how the one characteristic I really liked about him was his peace. Well, people would actually come up to him and ask him about his peace, and they wanted it for themselves, and they were asking how can they get it. He would just kind of explain, and he would say, you already have it, but your mind is too busy and it's making way too much noise. You have it already, you just can't feel it because your mind is making too much noise. So just that quote alone is what inspired this book, because it led him on a journey of so many more different experiences, but that quote was pretty much what his life turned into. Like if someone came up to you and said, hey, I want to make as much money as you, and you told them, well, you're already capable of it, you just need to kind of clear it up a bit and then you'll have it. For them who've maybe never gotten to that level before, really won't understand it. And something when it comes to like thoughts and the way you operate your mind, it's a very hard feature, because if someone tells you, if you're anxious and you're feeling anxious, and you go tell someone who's not anxious, hey, I don't want to be anxious, I want to be just like you are, and then that person turns around and tells you, well, you already are, it might be hard to really understand. But I think that's why it's important. That's exactly why it's important, and that's why you have to kind of sit down and dive a little deeper, because if you are looking for something like that, it's very spiritual, and it's a nice opportunity to connect with yourself and really understand yourself better. And he also says another key thing in here that I really liked. Before I actually discovered Eckhart Tolle, I was seeing a lot of the scripture from Christianity, and also kind of seeing the practicality of like things like Buddhism or different types of thought processes. And Eckhart Tolle mentions that he's going to kind of go through both, not on purpose, but kind of just add them in and see how kind of they bridge together. And that's something that I really liked, because I've seen these correlations between some Christianity and Buddhism specifically, where they'll kind of be saying the same thing, and one might seem a little bit different, and one might seem like a little bit more of your learning style, but they're really saying the same thing. So he also talks about how expect that within the future of this book, or throughout the book, of course, and to kind of pay attention for that. So that's something I was really excited for when first reading it, and that's something we're going to go in through when we actually go through the chapters. So that was pretty much the introduction. My initial plan was to do introduction and chapter 1, but this video is running a little long because I did want to explain my favorite parts of it, and of course we didn't actually get to cover the entire intro. So if you are interested in like looking more about this book or seeing what I possibly couldn't have added in, of course I can't read it word for word, I would recommend picking up this book. Honestly, for me, I really value spirituality, or at least being one with yourself and understanding yourself better. I feel like it's a really good base to start at before moving anywhere, whether it's like jobs or hobbies or anything. I feel like you might be able to get your own experiences, and it could be something interesting and to look into if you don't normally do it. It could be nice to just change up what you normally do, or if you do already enjoy it, it could be nice to go even further. You can never really know enough, and even if you take one great thing out of this book, I think it's worth the maybe like $8 or $9 that it costs to buy this book. Of course, we haven't even gone through the rest of it, so if you like this introduction explanation, just leave a like, so that way I know that you guys like these kind of videos. So I do make a bit of different kinds of videos. I'm not exactly sure what type I want to stay with, but I think that's the pretty cool part about it, is I can make whatever I want, because I really am enjoying making them. So I don't really plan to kind of narrow it down. Just whatever I'm feeling like is what I want to kind of put out. But I do want to go through the entire book since I've started it, go through every chapter at least and explain something cool about each one. Try to find a way to narrow down the time limit, so that way they're not extensive, because this is the whole book and they take forever to read. But I think it's worth it, and it's important to sit down and kind of learn something new every day. So it's right up my alley. I really like it. But yeah, so that way I can cut this short. See you guys in the next video, and thanks.